There is an invisible signal that rises when the heart begins to chase. It is not the words you say or the thoughts you think. It is a subtle vibration, and it carries the energy of emptiness. Every time you long for something with desperation, it recedes. Every time you sit in silent craving for a message, it delays. Every time you ache for someone to truly see you, they somehow become blind. This is not punishment. It is energetic cause and effect. Carl Jung would say, it is the unconscious speaking through your field of being, not as fate, but as a reflection of your unhealed parts. Even when you smile and say, "I'm fine," the body does not lie. Even when you act calm and measured, the frequency of lack still echoes through your gestures, your pauses, your breath. You do not magnetize your desires with hopeful thoughts. You do so through the silent language of vibration. And when your field is saturated in clinging, in needing, in proving, you're not attracting. You're subtly repelling. This is not a story of wanting. This is the anatomy of resonance. When your vibration says, "I am incomplete," the world hears it and begins to mirror that very belief. Jung understood this not through spiritual trends, but through the psyche. He saw that our inner reality, especially the rejected or denied aspects of self, project outward and shape our world in uncanny ways. You think you're reaching forward, but really, you're sending a signal that says, "I'm not whole yet." There are people who walk into a room and change the entire atmosphere, not with words, but with energy. And there are others who, even with their best smile, bring unease. This is not about charm. It is the unconscious field. Jung didn't use the word vibration in the mystical sense, but he spent his life studying how the psyche radiates unseen content. The self speaks, not only through language, but through frequency. And when that frequency is driven by fear, fear of loss, fear of not being loved, fear of being forgotten, then even your gentlest longing is heavy. It weighs on the people around you, and they begin to slowly pull away. Not because they don't care, but because they don't want to be responsible for your inner child's unresolved cry. Jung said that what we do not bring into consciousness appears in our lives as fate. And so, when you move through the world trying to hold love, prove worth, or keep someone close, without seeing the fear beneath, life becomes a mirror of your shadow. You do not attract what you say you want. You attract what your energy insists is missing. Imagine this. You meet someone new. You seem carefree. You act confident. But behind the scenes, you're checking your phone repeatedly. You overthink their silences. You replay their words. This, Jung would say, is the unconscious in action. On the outside, you seem calm, but your nervous system is shouting. Your vibration says, "Please don't leave me. Please make me enough." This dynamic does not begin with others. It begins with the wounded ego, the part of you that cannot bear stillness, because stillness might mean rejection. This is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Until you bring it into awareness, your unconscious will direct every interaction. It will live through you and wear the mask of love. Many read books about manifestation. They visualize. They script. They say the right affirmations. But none of it matters if the inner frequency still whispers, "I'm not enough unless I receive this." The law of vibration is not about your goals. It's about your essence. If you act from lack, the world does not give you what you hope for. It gives you more situations that reflect that lack. This is where Jung's understanding of projection becomes vital. He taught that when we do not accept certain parts of ourselves, when we reject our fears, our longings, our neediness, those aspects are cast onto others, and those others become mirrors, not because they are your destiny, but because they reflect your disowned truths. You may believe you're loving someone, but if that love is rooted in the terror of being alone, it is not love. It is survival. And survival is not magnetic. It drains both you and them. Jung called this the shadow's possession, when the ego is so unaware of its true motivation that the unconscious takes over entirely. It is not the world punishing you. It is your vibration, asking to be seen, to be healed. As Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Until you look inside and meet that aching part with compassion and presence, it will continue to run your life, and you will continue to call it fate. So, the moment you stop chasing, not just in behavior, but in vibration, something begins to shift. You stop living from lack. You stop reaching from fear. You begin to return to yourself. And when you return, the signal changes. You are no longer saying, "Complete me." You are saying, "I am complete." And from that place, I connect. The soul never needed to chase. The self, as Jung described, is whole by nature. Only the ego clings, fights, and controls. But the deeper you go, the more you realize your very presence is enough. And when your energy begins to whisper, "I am whole," the world cannot help but respond with recognition. There is a truth that lingers beneath every interaction. You are not calling things to you with words, but with your energy. That's why it often feels like the harder you try, the more life resists. You think it's about effort, about precision, about doing all the right things. But the field that surrounds you is not moved by effort, it is shaped by essence. Carl Jung understood this. He saw that our psyche sends signals long before we act, and it's these signals that shape how the world responds. You may speak of healing, of moving forward. You may journal, read, pray, meditate, but if the vibration within you is still begging, still waiting for someone to validate your wholeness, then the outcome will be the same. The outer world reflects the vibration of your inner one, not always immediately, but always with perfect accuracy. You do not need to be perfect to receive love, but you must be aware. Because when you are unaware, your life is led by echoes of past wounds, not by your present truth. Jung described this as the unconscious pattern that seeks repetition, not because it wants pain, but because it's trying to resolve something left open. Until that longing is seen, you will meet the same soul in different faces, trying again and again to rewrite the original story. This is not a flaw in you. This is how the psyche moves, through symbols, through patterns, through reenactment. It is not punishment. It is invitation. Every delay, every withdrawal, every broken connection is not the world rejecting you. It is your own energy field asking, "Do you see me yet? Do you hear what I've been saying in silence?" Carl Jung's concept of projection is central here. He said we project our unintegrated parts, everything we cannot accept or understand, onto the people we desire. So, when you pursue someone with urgency, often you're not loving them. You're chasing a forgotten version of yourself, the one you left behind the day you decided you weren't enough on your own. This is what we do when we haven't yet brought the shadow into light. We disguise our longing as romance. We cloak our wounds in hope. We say, "Maybe this one will stay. Maybe this time I'll finally feel chosen." But it is not another's love that heals that ache. It is the return of your own presence to the parts of you that you thought had to be erased in order to be loved. Let me tell you a story. Carla, a woman of depth and reflection, spent years rebuilding after heartbreak. She read every book. She went to therapy. She created routines that looked like healing. And in many ways, she was strong. But each time she opened her heart again, something strange would happen. The person would slowly retreat without clear reason, without conflict. On the surface, Carla had transformed. But beneath the transformation was a thread still waiting to be pulled. In one pivotal moment, her therapist said quietly, "You're not seeking love, you're seeking confirmation." And that changed everything. Because it was true. Carla was not clinging to a person. She was clinging to a silent hope. Please let this one prove that I'm lovable. She was not connecting. She was testing. Not consciously, but energetically. Jung would say her shadow was still guiding her. Her efforts were not wrong. They were simply incomplete. She had polished the mirror, but had not yet turned to face the image staring back. The fear that without being chosen, she would remain fractured. That was the true source of the energy others kept stepping away from. Until we recognize the hidden motive beneath our longing, we will remain trapped in cycles. As Jung wrote, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carla had imagined the light, but now she had to look directly at the fear beneath her need to be loved. The belief that unless someone stayed, she was not enough. Energy cannot be masked by good behavior. The universe does not answer checklists, it answers signals. And Carla's signal, though subtle, was clear. Tell me I matter, so I don't have to doubt it anymore. That request, unspoken yet ever present, created a weight in every new connection. The weight of responsibility, one that no partner could carry without losing themselves. Carla's awakening was not dramatic. It was quiet. The kind of awakening that happens in the silence between two sentences. She stopped asking why others left. She started asking, am I truly present? Or am I asking someone to complete a story I haven't finished writing myself? That is when her frequency began to shift. Not because she forced it, but because she finally told herself the truth. From that day, her energy no longer begged. It no longer reached. It rested. She chose herself. Not in a performative way, not in a self-help cliché, but in the deepest, stillest part of her soul. And from that space, everything changed. Because when the vibration changes, so does the mirror of reality. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not because self-acceptance is difficult, but because it means giving up the chase. It means saying, even if no one comes, I am here. And when you say that, when your very presence radiates self-recognition, the world finally sees you not as someone to rescue, but as someone who has arrived. This is not about being indifferent. It's about being whole, and wholeness does not cling. It does not chase. It does not ask for proof. It simply lives. And in that life, it becomes magnetic. Not because it is trying to attract, but because it no longer needs to. When Carla stopped reaching for validation, something within her began to settle. She wasn't forcing peace. She was finally becoming aware of the frequency she'd been living in. That frequency had always been there, humming beneath her thoughts and her actions, guiding choices she thought were free. Carl Jung called this the unconscious mechanism, the place where the real decisions are made, often long before we realize we've made them. The truth is, you are not simply shaped by the events in your life. You are shaped by the emotional patterns that interpret those events. Two people can face the same silence from a lover. One feels calm. The other spirals into panic. What makes the difference? Not strength, not logic, but vibration. The energy field you operate from, even if you can't see it, decides how you feel when things are uncertain. Jung made a vital distinction between desires born of the ego and the deeper movements of the self. Ego desires often mask insecurity, a hunger not for experience, but for repair. When you pursue someone not out of love but out of emptiness, you're not creating connection. You're reenacting a psychic split. The part of you that still believes I must be chosen to be enough quietly takes over. And it's not loud, it doesn't scream, it doesn't even need to speak. The vibration alone is enough. You can smile, text with care, speak kindly, but if the energy beneath says, please fix the part of me that doesn't feel whole, then you're not just asking for love. You're asking to be healed by someone who was never meant to carry that burden. This is why you might meet someone who says all the right things, yet you feel something is off. Or why a person says they've moved on, but their energy still clings. Jung understood that the unconscious doesn't lie. It radiates. You cannot cover it with words. You cannot hide it with timing or charm. What you have not faced will reveal itself in the space between your sentences, in the pauses of your breath, in the way your body leans toward another without realizing. In Man and His Symbols, Jung wrote that the psyche does not speak in logic. It speaks in images, symbols, and emotional resonance. That means, even if your conscious mind believes you are healed, your energy may still be sending the opposite message. The world will listen to your vibration before it listens to your voice. This explains why so many people, like Carla, do all the right things and still attract the same painful experiences. Because the story hasn't changed, only the surface, and life doesn't respond to your rituals. It responds to your resonance. Until the unconscious becomes conscious, as Jung said, it will run your life, and you'll call it fate. So many of us live in a vibration of effort. We try to look strong. We try to move on. We try to manifest something better. But beneath it all, there's still a voice that says, "Please, let me be chosen." It's not always obvious. It hides beneath good intentions. But energy cannot be fooled. It reveals everything. Jung often spoke of individuation, the journey back to wholeness. It's not about becoming a new person. It's about bringing all of yourself back into one place. The longing, the fear, the rejection, the shadow, all seen, all welcomed. Because only then can your energy become unified. Only then can you stop sending out signals that contradict your words. Have you ever wondered why the same kind of person keeps showing up in your life? Or why the same kind of disappointment happens even when you try so hard to be different? This is not coincidence. It's vibration, the energy of your unconscious patterns drawing mirrors toward you, not to punish you, but to wake you up. You don't have to figure it all out at once. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You only need to ask yourself, honestly, what part of me is still reaching for someone to prove that I am worthy? The moment you ask that question, without fear, you step out of the illusion. And the moment you answer it with presence, your signal begins to change. Carl Jung once said the self is not just the center, but the totality, the whole of your conscious and unconscious being. That means your truth isn't found by removing parts of you. It's found by bringing every part into light, even the part that feels ashamed to need, even the part that begs. When you accept that you have chased, not out of foolishness, but out of pain, you reclaim your energy. And when you no longer send the frequency of begging, the world stops sending you tests. Because you are no longer unconsciously asking, "Will someone love me now?" Instead, your entire being says, "I already am." You become the field. You become the vibration. You stop performing. You stop fixing. You return. And the return is everything. In that space, you don't need to attract anything. You are already resonating with what is truly meant for you. There is no more effort, only alignment. Understanding the nature of your vibration is not the same as releasing it. Insight alone does not liberate you. The mind may say, "I've moved on," but the body still remembers the rhythm of anxiety. The breath still shortens when a message doesn't come. The stomach still turns at the idea of being left behind again. Carl Jung warned that knowledge, unless felt and integrated, changes nothing. It is only when the unconscious content is brought into lived awareness that transformation begins. Let me offer another mirror. Natalia's story. A woman of strength, of wisdom, of deep reflection. After enduring a relationship that nearly hollowed her from the inside, she rose. She read, she healed, she shared her process with others. Her friends called her an example of resilience, and in many ways she was. But when she met someone new, something subtle returned. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't drama. It was the quiet trembling of anticipation, the old ache dressed in new hope. Natalia found herself once again watching the screen, scanning the time between replies, decoding every pause. She didn't beg, she didn't speak the fear aloud. But it lived in her nervous system. Her therapist noticed it before she did, and said gently, "Your voice says peace, but your energy is still waiting to be saved." And that shattered the illusion of her progress. Not to diminish it, but to deepen it. Because what she thought she had healed, she had only rearranged. This is not failure. This is the nature of psychological truth. Jung taught that the unconscious doesn't disappear with effort. It transforms only when it is brought into conscious relationship with the whole personality. Otherwise, it remains like a silent architect, shaping your life with old blueprints. You change the characters, the scenery, even the pace, but the emotional outcome is eerily familiar. If you've ever wondered why your patterns persist despite your growth, this is why. Until the wounded part of you is not only seen, but also reparented with presence, your vibration continues to hum the same note. Don't hurt me again. Don't leave me like they did. And others, even with the best intentions, feel that hidden plea and either retreat or play out the script you never meant to write again. Natalia hadn't failed to heal. She simply hadn't gone far enough. Her actions were new, but her motive remained the same: to secure certainty. And when certainty becomes the hidden goal of love, love begins to distort. It becomes heavy. Even when it's quiet, it becomes expectation wrapped in politeness. And those around you feel it, not through logic, but through vibration. Jung explained this phenomenon as the compulsion to repeat. It is the drive within us to recreate unresolved dynamics, not because we enjoy suffering, but because we are trying to finish an emotional conversation that was never completed. We keep asking, will someone finally love me in a way that silences the pain? But the answer never arrives externally, because it was never the outer world's job to complete that sentence. You can change the person, the city, the season, and yet the vibration follows, until it is released not through suppression, but through compassion. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is your map. Jung believed the unconscious content is not meant to be rejected but explored, embraced, understood. Only then can the field around you stop broadcasting "rescue me" and begin to hum with the quiet power of "I am enough." So many live in this halfway space, speaking of healing, while still broadcasting fear. It's not hypocrisy. It's the gap between knowing and embodying. The ego wants to fix it quickly, but the soul moves slowly, rhythmically, through the terrain of old wounds, childhood echoes, and forgotten needs. The journey is not linear. It spirals, always returning to the part of you that still feels incomplete. Natalia's transformation didn't come from a sudden epiphany. It came from honest awareness. She didn't shame herself for still longing. She didn't suppress her questions. She sat with them. She observed the moment she reached for her phone, not to control it, but to meet the inner child that whispered, "Am I safe now? Will he still stay?" And in that moment of presence, she began to mother her own fear. This is the essence of Jungian work. Not to get rid of the shadow, but to integrate it, to walk beside it, to no longer pretend you don't need love, but to realize that you do, and that this need does not make you weak. It makes you real, but the source of that love must come from within first. Only then does the outside reflect what is whole rather than echo what is wounded. From that shift, Natalia no longer vibrated, "Choose me, so I can relax." She began to radiate, "I am grounded. And from that place, I can love freely." Her energy changed not by denying her past, but by finally choosing to carry it with grace rather than shame. She was no longer chasing peace through someone else. She had become the presence that held her own peace. And once again, Jung's words proved true. Healing only comes when we make the unconscious conscious and integrate it into our full personality. That is the real alignment. Not the absence of need, but the awareness of it, held with maturity, not desperation. And in that field, real love is finally possible. Not because it completes you, but because it meets you. Imagine the moment you place your phone face down and say, "I'm done waiting." You tell yourself you've let go. You breathe deeply, trying to move on. And yet, 5 minutes later, your hand moves as if it belongs to someone else. You unlock the screen, you check, you scroll, you search for signs. What you told yourself you released is still alive in your nervous system. That isn't surrender. That's control disguised as stillness. And Carl Jung would tell you, it is not the action, but the motive beneath it that reveals your truth. Control is not strength. It is the mind's strategy to avoid what it doesn't understand. It says, if I can predict what's next, I won't be hurt. It dresses up in the language of maturity, of clarity, of reason. But underneath, it trembles. Underneath, it says, I don't know how to be still without reassurance. And the moment uncertainty appears, the compulsion to act, to ask, to fix, return. Jung taught that when something within remains unconscious, it appears outside of us as fate. So when we are still clinging internally, the universe doesn't obey the surface. It responds to the inner command. And that command, even if gentle, often sounds like this. Give me certainty, so I can relax. Show me I matter, so I can stop asking. This energy does not draw in love. It chokes it. Not out of cruelty, but out of need. When we chase others from that place, we are not actually pursuing love. We are trying to manage fear. The fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, the fear of becoming invisible. But fear cannot be negotiated with strategy. It cannot be calmed by another's consistency. Only your presence, your true, grounded, inner presence, can quiet that storm. Jung never romanticized surrender. He understood it as a confrontation with the deepest part of the self, the part that wants control because it still remembers the time it had none. The part of you that says, if I don't text first, they'll forget me, or if I don't ask, I'll never know what they're thinking, is not evil. It is ancient. It is a child, frozen in time. But letting that child drive your present robs you of peace and power. Think of the last time someone pulled away slightly, not with cruelty, but with silence. How did you respond? Did you step into trust, or did your energy tighten into anxiety? Did you start making plans to win them back? Not out loud, but in your mind. Did you tell yourself you were calm while watching the clock? These are the small betrayals of the self we perform when we still fear losing control. Control does not protect you. It only makes love conditional. It says, as long as I feel safe, I can love. But the soul does not love with terms. It loves because it is love. And when you are acting from your center, what Jung called the self, you are not strategizing. You are radiating. There is no plan. There is no manipulation. There is only present. A woman named Lena once shared this. She had entered a new relationship feeling more balanced than ever. She told herself she would not repeat old mistakes. She meditated. She wrote affirmations. She practiced calm. But when her partner went quiet for a few hours, her mind erupted. Her thoughts spiraled into old questions. Did I say too much? Should I follow up? What if they're slipping away already? She didn't send a message. She didn't act on the fear. But the vibration, that deep, hidden signal of "please don't abandon me," filled the room. Her partner felt it, even without words. Eventually, they pulled back. When asked why, they simply said, something felt heavy. That's all, just heavy. And that weight was Lena's unspoken fear, radiating into the space. This is what happens when you act calm, but vibrate control. People feel it. It is not in your words, it is in your nervous system, in your emotional climate. Jung believed the psyche is a self-regulating system. It wants to become whole. But until you let go of the need to choreograph every moment, you remain at war with life itself. Letting go doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you choose trust over tension. It means that even when the outcome is unclear, you do not abandon yourself. You sit with the fire of not knowing. You listen to the fear without obeying it. You stay, not for them, but for you. Surrender is not the absence of power. It is its highest expression. Because in surrender, you are no longer reacting to life. You are responding from your center. And when you live from that center, from that deep inner self Jung wrote about, you no longer ask, "What must I do to be kept?" You ask, "Who am I?" Even if nothing changes. And that question leads to a different kind of silence. One filled not with panic, but with presence. A silence in which your body breathes fully. Your heart stays open, and your vibration says, "I am not reaching. I am resting." In that stillness, real connection begins. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped pushing it away. Surrender, in its truest form, does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to arrive. It is not the act of pulling away from love, but the courage to show up without needing to control its outcome. Carl Jung described the self as the union of opposites, the place where we are no longer fighting with who we are, no longer hiding behind fear, no longer chasing shadows. This self doesn't try to attract, it simply is, and in that being, it becomes quietly magnetic. True presence cannot be measured by stillness alone. It is not about how little you say, or how calm your exterior seems. It is the silent field of energy you carry, when your inner world no longer trembles with unsaid need, when your nervous system no longer coils at uncertainty, when your breath remains steady, even as others come close or pull away. That is the kind of presence that shifts a room, not because of what you do, but because of what you are no longer doing. If you've ever met someone who entered a space and instantly brought calm without a word, you've witnessed this frequency. Their energy doesn't grasp. It doesn't try. It doesn't need. It simply holds. You find yourself drawn to them, not because they perform presence, but because they have stopped resisting their own truth. That is the power of someone who no longer lives in reaction to fear. Now pause. Right now. Put down the device. Close your eyes. Can you feel yourself here, or is your mind still wandering to what might happen next? Is your body seated in this moment, or are you living 3 conversations ahead? This simple act, checking whether you're present, is a mirror. It tells you whether you are living in the frequency of the now or still chasing life through imagined futures. Jung taught that the self emerges through the process of individuation, the painful yet beautiful journey of returning to our original wholeness. But you cannot be whole if you're always fleeing your own company. Presence is not built through control. It is built through courage, the courage to remain with your own breath, your own ache, your own beauty, without needing anything to validate it. Presence is the frequency of wholeness. It does not say, "Please see me." It says, "I already see myself." It does not ask, "Will you choose me?" It declares, "I have chosen myself." Again and again, until I remembered I was never missing. When you radiate this energy, you do not attract through performance. You become a mirror, and those who see clearly will find themselves reflected in you. Daniela's story brings this into sharp relief. For years, she repeated the same emotional dance: connection, excitement, then collapse. Not because she was dramatic or needy, but because her energy vibrated with unspoken demand. Show me that I matter. And every time someone hesitated, that invisible thread pulled tighter. Her inner world would spiral, even while her outer world stayed calm. Then, one morning, she made a vow not to chase less, but to be more present. She stopped trying to perfect her response time, stopped analyzing pauses, stopped reading between lines that weren't written. Instead, she began each day with a practice of radical stillness. 10 minutes, no distractions, just breath, not to feel better, but to be with what was. The shift was not immediate, but over time, something changed. She no longer checked her phone with dread. She no longer made decisions to avoid discomfort. Her field became clear, centered, quietly confident. And from that clarity, the kind of connections she attracted began to change. Not because they were new kinds of people, but because she was no longer echoing the energy of need. Jung wrote in Psychology and Alchemy that the self is not an improvement project. It is a realization, a homecoming to what has always been. Presence is not earned through perfection. It is remembered through practice, through the willingness to remain, to breathe, to stop editing yourself in real time just to avoid feeling unworthy. You don't have to disappear to be safe. You don't have to be the cool one who never cares. That's not presence. That's defense. Real presence is vulnerable. It is open without needing to be affirmed. It is grounded without being guarded. It is the brave act of saying, I am here just as I am, and I will not abandon myself to keep someone else. This is not a technique. It's a transformation. You don't build presence with tips or scripts. You become it when you no longer chase emotional safety, when you no longer try to win the moment, when you stop trying to be chosen and choose, instead, to live from the wholeness within. So, if you've ever asked, how can I attract better? Shift the question. Ask instead, what am I broadcasting when I'm not even speaking? Presence will not guarantee the outcome you want, but it will align you with what resonates with your soul, and that is worth everything. True presence does not cling. It does not beg, chase, or plead with reality to bend. But that level of inner steadiness is not born from coldness. It emerges from something far more sacred, vibrational detachment. Not indifference, but devotion to one's own center. Carl Jung understood that when the unconscious controls you, it doesn't need words. It moves through you, in glances, impulses, breath, and tone, until your entire being becomes an unspoken question. Will you stay? Will you fix the ache I've never faced? Vibrational detachment is the decision to stop asking that question. Not by pretending you don't care, but by turning inward, sitting beside the part of you that does, and choosing not to let it rule your life. This is not abandonment of emotion. It is emotional self-responsibility. The moment you stop needing someone else to regulate your self-worth, the frequency you emit begins to shift. You've likely felt it. The aching need to reach out just to ease the growing silence. The burning desire to text again, to interpret every as a sign of something wrong. But this urge is not love. It is anxiety in disguise. It is not a message to them. It's a message to you. I feel unsafe in the unknown. And unless that energy is held, not acted on, your actions will always echo the past. Jung warned that when a complex is activated, a charged emotional pattern lodged in the unconscious, we are no longer fully ourselves. We become possessed by a past emotion masquerading as the present. And when we are possessed by a fear of loss, even our most tender gestures are loaded with energetic weight. They don't come from love. They come from fear's grip. That's why presence without detachment feels heavy. You're physically still, but emotionally clinging. You say, I'm okay, while sending a vibration that says, validate me, see me, reassure me. It's not shameful. It's simply unprocessed pain. But unless you pause and witness the root of that vibration, it continues broadcasting, and others, even unknowingly, feel its pull. Vibrational detachment means that when the impulse to act arises, you stop. Not forever, just for one breath, then 2, then 5. You ask yourself, am I reaching out because I'm grounded, or because I'm afraid. That single question can interrupt the spell of unconscious behavior and return you to the self, the quiet, unshakable presence within you that doesn't need to perform. This self, as Jung described in the Red Book, is the one who speaks through dreams, through silence, through synchronicity. It knows what the ego forgets, that not every silence is abandonment, not every delay is rejection, and not every pause needs to be filled. The self trusts what the ego tries to control. If you've ever felt consumed by the need to know where you stand, you're not alone. That ache is ancient. It doesn't belong to this person or this moment. It echoes from every moment in your life where your worth felt like it was in someone else's hand. But vibrational detachment is how you take it back, not with anger, not with silence, but with clarity. Begin by creating small, sacred spaces of non-reaction. 10 minutes without your phone. A walk without checking who might have written. A breath where you don't rush to fix the discomfort. In those moments, you're not trying to be strong. You're remembering who you were before fear took over. You're reminding your body, we are safe even in uncertainty. This is not about becoming untouchable. Jung would never encourage that. It's about becoming whole enough to touch the world without needing it to respond a certain way. It's about sending a vibration that says, I am here not to be filled, but to be met. And those who can't meet you there will quietly fall away, not as punishment, but as protection. Detachment, when done with love, is not distance. It is presence without need. It's the state of being where you can love fully, yet still hold yourself completely, where you can want connection, but not demand it to soothe your ache, where you can let others come and go without collapsing every time someone doesn't stay. This is how magnetism is born, not from beauty, charm, or performance, but from wholeness. You don't draw people in by needing them. You draw them in by not needing anything. And in that space, you don't fear loss, because you know, I have already returned to myself. I am no longer chasing anything. I am no longer broadcasting a signal of lack. I am simply being, and that is more than enough. So, if you've ever asked, how do I keep them? Shift the question. Ask instead, what part of me still believes I must be kept to be worthy? And in answering that, you begin the true work, the work of becoming the one you've been searching for all along. Stillness is not the absence of desire. It is the presence of trust. When you stop chasing what was never meant to be captured, when you no longer shape yourself into what you believe will be loved, something extraordinary happens. Your frequency no longer whispers, need me. It begins to radiate, I am. And in that radiant stillness, the world responds, not out of obligation, but resonance. Carl Jung called this alignment with the self. When your outer life reflects not the ego's demand, but the soul's quiet truth. You do not need to chase what is already attuned to your essence, but you must be willing to stop broadcasting the old signal, the one shaped by memory, by wound, by fear. Jung warned that when we do not recognize our inner patterns, they rule us. They select our partners, shape our stories, and disguise themselves as fate. But once you become conscious of the vibration you carry, you are no longer a passive participant. You become a creator, a transmitter of clarity. You no longer plead through your silence. You no longer reach through performance. You simply stand in your own sacred field, unmoved by external delay. The person who once reached out to avoid abandonment now listens instead, breathes instead, and asks, what is true here? That is the moment you stop reacting and begin responding, not to the world, but to your own wholeness. There is no checklist that will get you there, no script to memorize, only the moment-by-moment choice to stay present with yourself. The moment you notice your energy beginning to spiral and choose stillness, the moment you want to reach, to ask, to grasp, and instead you return to breath. These are not small acts. They are the revolution of a soul that no longer wishes to be saved. Radiance is not what you do. It is what you become when you no longer reject your own company. And from that radiance, everything that matches your wholeness begins to arrive. Not always immediately, not always in the form you imagined, but inevitably, and without force. Jung said, what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. When you stop resisting your solitude, it becomes a sanctuary. When you stop resisting uncertainty, it becomes the birthplace of trust. There is a different kind of love waiting for the version of you that no longer chases. A love that does not arrive to complete you, but to walk beside you. A love that is not loud or urgent, but present. A love that feels like breathing. But that love cannot find you if you are still emitting the frequency of fear. It is not punishment. It is simply resonance. What you are speaks louder than what you want. You may ask now, how do I hold this vibration? The answer is, you don't hold it. You live it. You don't need to remember it. You need to become it. Each day you return to your own stillness. Each moment, you notice the tension rising and choose softness instead. That is how the old frequency dies. Not with one final act, but through thousands of quiet decisions to stay with yourself. You do not need to become someone new. You only need to become who you were before the world convinced you that you were not enough. The child who once danced without needing an audience. The soul who once dreamed without needing permission. That version of you still lives within. Presence is the doorway back. Jung believed the true task of life is not to perfect the ego, but to reunite with the self. To bring all the fragmented pieces of who we are back into a single flame. That flame does not beg to be seen. It simply burns. It is not loud, but its warmth is unforgettable. And when you live from that place, others feel it. They may not understand why, but they feel safe, seen, moved. So, if you're still wondering why things haven't shifted yet, ask not what the world is doing. Ask what your energy is saying. And if your energy has been repeating the story of I lack, then it's time to choose a new story. Not with effort, but with stillness. Not with striving, but with presence. Repeat after me, quietly or aloud. I do not chase. I do not cling. I radiate. Not because I have mastered the moment, but because I have returned to the self, the only home I ever truly needed. And in that return, the world does not ignore me. It simply meets me with the truth I now carry. So, let the old vibration fall away. Let the ache subside. Let the energy that once begged now breathe. You are no longer looking for confirmation. You have become it. The search is over. The signal has changed. And because of that, everything that is true, real, and whole will now find its way. Not to who you pretended to be, but to who you finally allowed yourself to become.